Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football and preview the game on Sunday between the Seahawks and the at-home Tennessee Titans. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing?
Doing good. This is the Seahawks made it through their gauntlet and have reached the part of the season where us and other experts have said that the Seahawks should go 3-0 and get their way into the playoffs with these last three games. These are three very beatable teams, and they're the first ones up, and that's Tennessee. And Tennessee is not a particularly good football team right now. So
they're not particularly bad, but they're not great.
Yeah, but they're not good. They're not good, really good at anything.
No, they're not. They're not. You know, it's interesting. You'd mentioned that at the top as far as predicting the record and us predicting 3-0 and so forth. I will point out that we did that at the very beginning of the season. We saw the gauntlet stretch and we saw the games after, and even if they completely discombobulated in that very difficult stretch of games, they could get back, right the ship, and get into the playoffs, and that's kind of what they're doing. Although they did beat a nice Eagles club at home last Monday night. Fantastic game, a lot of fun for everyone. But back to business now. Can they? Is there anything that they did in the Eagles game that they can duplicate and carry forward out of that game? Specifically, running the ball effectively on offense and making stops on defense.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what the team did in that game. I don't see anything that we talked about that doesn't translate into this game. Is there anything that Tennessee does that's better than what Philly does? It's hard. It's hard to find a lot of things.
Yeah, Tennessee rushes the passer pretty good. So I'll tip the hat to that. I would have thought the Eagles would have been fantastic at that this year based on their personnel and just haven't got it done. But the Titans are pretty decent. They had 4 sacks last week against Houston. And, the interesting thing about the Titans is they started the year 3-7, but they've won 2 out of the last 4 games. The only 2 losses they've had have come in overtime. 4 out of the 5 wins have come at home where they're 4-3. So I don't think there is, they're not a complete pushover. I hear you when you say, they don't do anything really well, but they do hang around. They do end up staying in games. And that was with rookie quarterback Will Levis starting most of the season. Doesn't sound like he's going to go this time. So, yeah, I mean.
When they made the switch from Ryan Tannehill to Will Levis, the team got better and they started winning.
Yeah.
That does not apply this week because we're looking at a team that's going to be run by Ryan Tannehill again.
Yeah. The last time Tannehill faced the Seahawks, though, he did have almost 350 yards.
That was a very different Tennessee team.
You asked me what the Tennessee Titans do better than the Seahawks, and I would say the clearest thing that stands out is red zone defense versus offense. They are number 1 in the NFL in red zone defense, which is weird because their
defense isn't really good at anything.
Right, and it's just kind of an outlier stat. I'm not exactly sure how that works, why that happened, but they're 10th in the NFL in third down conversions as well. So they do appear to tighten up a little bit when they need to. But for the most part, Seattle plays better statistically all the way down the board, both on offense and defense, I think, over this team for the most part. But it's not so lopsided that it's going to just be a complete wash. This game is going to be, to me, pretty tight and kind of keys in on stopping Derrick Henry. He's hasn't had a great season, but he's going to be 1,000-yard rusher this year. Last game was crazy bad for him. I think he had 17 rushing attempts for 9 yards, like a half a yard per carry on average. And if Seattle can do that, this game's in hand for Seattle for sure. And conversely, on the other side, we were able to finally really kind of run the ball, especially in the second half against the Eagles, and get some rhythm for those guys and the offense and move the chains. And I think if they can do that against this team, that's definitely, for me, one of the keys to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think Derrick Henry's reached that point in his career where he's just not going to be the guy he was a couple of years ago? Just too many injuries, too many miles
Workload.
on those wheels.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, he's almost 30, if not 30 right now. And that's kind of what happens, especially with workload guys like Derrick Henry is. He's still got the ability, though. If you take a look at him run, there's nothing wrong with him per se. It's just that I think the Titans have diminished across their offensive line, and defenses are keying in on him because they don't really have to watch Will Levis yet or Tannehill, and their receiving core is, minus DeAndre Hopkins, who's also diminished. Mm-hmm. They really don't have anybody that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, Henry, I just looked it up, is 29. He'll turn 30 in January. So, and he's only averaging 3.8 yards per carry this year.
Yeah. Defenses are really, I mean, they're putting an extra body on the line of scrimmage to stop him. Force the Titans to do other things, and it's been working. And you take a look at the Titans offense, it's not good. Nothing's good about it. They average about 17, 18 points a game. I would say in their last, I think 6 or 7 games, they haven't really scored over 17 points. It's going to be hard for them. They've scored 17 or fewer points in 9 of their 14 games so far.
Yeah,
was the stat I was thinking about.
And they're averaging 18.4 yards per game, points per game offensively. So
yeah,
I mean that's near the bottom of the league.
Yeah, they're a bottom 5 offense in this league with Derrick Henry. I mean, that kind of tells you the story, because they should really be at least middle of the pack, and they're not. And defensively, they're okay. They're just okay. And with a bad offense, that's why they're losing games.
Yeah, their defense is giving up 21.5 points per game. So, that's not terrible. It's not good, but it's not terrible. Conversely, Seattle's giving up 23.9. So Seattle's defense is actually giving up more points than Tennessee is, which we've seen because the defense has been genuinely bad at times for Seattle. But yeah, I mean, their defense isn't good enough to win them games alone. Their offense, you know what I mean? Like, it's not.
Yeah.
There are times when
Titans defense is ranked 17th in points allowed and 19th in yards. They're a middling defense. They do tighten up again on third down and in the red zone a little bit. But they don't generate turnovers very well. They're ranked 30th in the NFL in turnovers. And they allow explosive pass plays. They're ranked 18th in the NFL in explosive pass plays allowed, which is over 16 yards. And yeah, and they allow the 27th team in the NFL ranking on passer rating allowed. So I think most of it's, their run defense is okay, but their pass defense is horrible. And then their offense in general is horrible. So good teams, good offensive, good balanced teams go in and beat these guys, pretty handily. They've stayed close in their last four, last two for sure in overtime, but they're out of the playoffs. They're one of the few teams, I think one of three teams in the AFC that are ruled out so far. They've got 5 wins on the season,
Yeah, they're
9
5 and
losses.
9. They're
Yeah, yeah,
but they made the transition this year to Will Levis. They're getting him playing time. They're letting him get experience, letting him build up tape for self scouting over the off season. They'll be better for that. And it was an improvement just putting him in.
yeah.
So got
Yeah,
to say,
you proved to be right, Keith,
I,
in
I like
the
to think so.
analysis of him. And he dropped in the draft, and Tennessee really didn't need to pick him. I mean, they already had Malik Willis on the roster, and I think they'd signed Tannehill in the offseason. And then Levis comes in and kind of falls in their laps in the draft, which is good for them. I think he's shown that he's got a future in the NFL.
Yeah, well, he was my number 2
We'll see.
quarterback, and like CJ Stroud was 1, he was 2, which isn't it's not that isn't a hey look, I also had Young pretty much as I wouldn't draft him because of his size. Not that he
Hmm.
wasn't talented; he was extremely talented and had some great tape, but just too small for me. I was going to let someone else take that risk. But those were my top 2 guys, and both guys have shown this year that there's promise. That there's reason to
CJ
believe that they're going to
Stroud is more than just
be
promise.
good
That
guys.
dude's the legit guy for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got tons of guys out in this game, or at least not practicing through yesterday. I don't know exactly what that means, how
Oh,
that
I've got
translates.
listings for them for this game.
Yeah.
Safety Kevon Wallace is out. Defensive
Wow.
tackle Jeffrey Simmons is out. Wide
Mm.
receiver Kyle Phillips is out. Defensive end T.K. McClendon is out. Cornerback Sean Murphy Bunting. Safety Amani Hooker.
Wow.
Linebacker Jack Gibbons. And linebacker Luke Gifford. All of them are out. And then Will Levis is listed as questionable. But
That just changed today, actually. Yeah.
he was out there on Friday stretching, but then didn't practice at all. So he is listed as questionable, but not expected to play.
Yeah. Wow. That's tough for them. It's tough. It's already a young roster. To have that many people out in key positions is going to be interesting for them. It's a scary game. It's that, they're on their home field. They got a lot of pride. They're well coached.
Hmm.
But what are you going to do? I think Seahawks just got to go in and take care of business. So coming off that really good win, Keith, how's that leave you feeling as far as we talked about at the beginning of the show? How can we duplicate what we saw out of that Eagles game? How do we carry that forward into these last 3 games of the season, and really just take care of business and get into the playoffs?
Well, I think what it showed is that the Seahawks can still play with almost anyone. Like they can. The Eagles are a really good team. There's a lot of talent on that team, and the Seahawks were able to, rise to the occasion and play really well. And they did it in non-fluky ways, right? They ran the ball well, which we've been asking them to run the ball more all year. They played smart defense. They didn't give up big plays, which in part was because of benching a couple of guys. And these are things that I think you can continue to run with. I mean, why, especially given the state of the wide receiver core and that Tennessee has, why wouldn't you bring Mike Jackson back out and let him play again after the performance he put on last week? Maybe if you want to ease Tariq Woolen in and get him more time and let him prove that he can do what the coaches are telling him to do, like he did a year ago, and not freelance quite so much. Okay, you can do that, but you start Mike Jackson. You let him play because you're going to be better off when you do that. Honestly, I don't know if we can expect Julian Love to play as well as he did last week, where he was the NFC Defensive Player of the Week, because he hasn't played that well all season. But suddenly, with a more of a classic safety role and less of a guy that has to move around and do all sorts of things from different angles and different spots in the field, within that three safety look. Once they went to a two safety look, suddenly he looked better. And maybe that's the key for him, is that he just needs to be in a system where he's a little bit more comfortable. And that's what they ran against the Eagles. So if Jamal Adams doesn't play, maybe we get that kind of performance out of Julian Love again. And really, that was kind of the difference between that game and in other games, defensively for Seattle, is they just didn't give up the big play.
They were more disciplined.
They were a lot more disciplined. Now, we could complain, okay, they didn't get to the quarterback much, but they did that because they were trying to be really disciplined against one of the more mobile quarterbacks in the league. They were trying to make sure they stayed in their pass rush lanes. They didn't give him ways to escape and take off and, beat up on this team with his feet. Okay. I don't think you have to worry about that quite so much against Tennessee. I mean, Tannehill still has speed, but he's not as fast as he was when he came out of college, and isn't other than he's a straight line runner. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have the shiftiness where he's going to like make people miss and all that kind of stuff. So I think you can be a little bit more aggressive against a guy like Tannehill. He's also a hell of a lot easier to tackle than Jamar Hurts. Hurts just does not go down easy.
Yeah.
So
Well, Seattle came off a game where they didn't sack Jalen Hurts, but
yeah,
they held him to 143 yards and 2 interceptions. And
they
you
frustrated
mentioned
him.
you mentioned the idea that the defense was more disciplined and more focused, and I totally agree with that. I loved the way that the not only the defensive line played, just using a front four and staying out of the exotic blitzing and all that kind of stuff that can get you in trouble, especially with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts. But the back end guys really came through, and shout out to like a guy like Artie Burns too, who played significant snaps after really not playing most of the year, to come in and just seamlessly kind of fit in and establish his identity there in the nickel and slot coverage. And
Yeah, because they played three cornerbacks in this game a lot. They played more of a classic nickel, and you'd be without the two guys that you'd consider the starters in Seattle, right? So you had both Woolen and Spoon out, and so you had Mike Jackson on one side, you had Trey Brown on the other, and you had Artie Burns coming in the nickel, and he and Trey Brown kind of alternated depending on alignment, which one was in the slot, which one was on the outside. But those are the three guys that played, and those aren't the three guys that you'd consider starters. But that was the best defensive game that Seahawks have gotten from their secondary. And a lot of it had to do with just discipline, just being smart about doing your job, not trying to freelance, not trying to do other people's jobs, just being really disciplined about what you do. And it worked really well. And I think that goes to show you that, it's not just about physical talent in the NFL. I mean, if you've got the physical talent, that's even better. Because we all know that Jamal Adams has all the physical talent in the world, but this defense has been better without him. And that was true at the beginning of the year, and it was true in this last game, and it was true in the one game in the middle that he was out too. The defense has been better without Jamal Adams, without the freaky athlete who can do anything. They're better without that. And it's not that the freaky athlete's bad. It's just that they're better when they have guys that know their role, know their job, and do it really well, and not try and do a whole bunch of things.
So the Titans ranked 19th against the run in the NFL, but they just gave up 121 yards, 4.7 yards per carry to Devon Singletary from the Texans last week in their loss. And the good news for Seattle is we play the Steelers and the Cardinals, who are even worse against the run.
Mm-hmm.
So if Seattle can get on a roll and establish the run when we need to run and do it effectively, it kind of gives this team an identity, something that they can hang their hat on. Everything else works really well off of that, especially play action. If Gino's in there, Gino's an excellent play action guy. And I think it just gives them the best chance to win. And if the defense can just play as disciplined as they played in this last game, carry that forward, I think they've got a really good shot to A, win out, B, once they get into the playoffs, have teams that don't want to play them because, good, solid teams, well coached, with a quarterback that can win, with 2 minutes left in the game, is a dangerous team.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at the Seahawks just beat a team that was for most of the year thought of as the going to be the 1 seed. I mean, they were 10-1 at one point, and now they're probably going to end up as the 2 seed, and
Or 3, depending on Dallas. Yeah.
yeah, depending on Dallas. But yeah, so you have those 2 teams battling out for 2 and 3, but you have, but still, they're still going to be one of the top teams. Although it's possible that Philly could end up dropping all the way to the 5 seed.
They need to pick up. They need to start winning again.
Yeah, cool.
They've dropped three in a row.
Because you can't have the top 4 seeds are division winners. If Dallas ends up winning that division,
Yeah.
man, do you want to be the AFC or the NFC South division winner and have to play Philly in the first round of the playoffs?
Yeah. Right.
No, you don't want that. And even if it ends up being Dallas, you don't want that either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was interesting because I think, Philly's struggling right now. So I got to be a little cautious on the optimism, but it gave you a formula for winning against a good team. And when you get into the playoffs, you need to have that. You need to have your identity. You need to know who you are, what you do well, how to exploit weaknesses, how to take care of your own weaknesses. And Seattle can figure that out in the last 4 weeks. We've always said that this was a good roster, a good team. And it's, nobody likes to back into the playoffs. That's kind of how you feel that Seattle would do that. But we'd go in, potentially with 10 wins and winners of the last 4 heading into the playoffs. You start to feel
and that's the thing is I don't
better.
consider that backing into the playoffs.
No,
You win
right.
4 straight games to get in. That's going in hot, right? At this point, you could look at Philly, and Philly over these last 3 games goes 1-2, right? And that's backing into the playoffs
That's backing in.
because you'd still have 11 wins, and you'd end up, the 5 seed, but you will have lost, 5 of your last 6 games. That's backing into the playoffs. But you win 4 straight, you win out, get yourself in. That's a team that's getting hot at the right time. And
Yeah, who would you rather have? Who would you rather be behind, Philadelphia or Seattle?
when you look at the other playoff teams, other than San Francisco, is there any team in the NFC that if you're Seattle, and you make it into the playoffs, other than the 49ers, is there
Well, I mean, you
any
got to pay
team that
attention to the
you?
Lions. You got to pay attention to the Cowboys.
No, I'm not saying you can't. You don't have to pay attention. I'm saying, is there any team that you'd be afraid of?
Right? I mean,
Because you look at what
we
Seattle
played
did
Dallas
against.
very close. We beat the Lions and we beat the Eagles.
Hmm.
And you just have to worry about how either us or somebody else needs to get past the 49ers.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at with what Seattle has figured out on defense with these personnel changes, and hopefully it will result in, maybe Tariq Woolen coming back onto the field, but coming back on and playing smarter. So we get both his physical ability and the attention to detail that's necessary. I think you could slow down Dallas enough to beat them. I mean, that was a really close game, and Seattle was still giving up big plays, at will. And so I think you could make a case that Seattle could win that game. They already
Yeah.
beat Philly, so you can definitely figure that out. There's none of the other wild card teams or Tampa, whoever ends up coming out of the South. None of those teams are going to scare you.
What do you think
It's
of the
just a matter of
Rams?
what's going to happen with San Francisco. Can you either get help and have someone else, pick them off, or can you figure something out where you can make it and get by them? Um, this team can win. This team can get there. It's talented enough. To me, there's one team in the NFC that I know is better than Seattle. Then again, I have a pretty good idea that one team is better than almost any team in the NFL right now.
And there's another team though that we haven't been able to get by, and that's the Rams. Rams are now 8-7. The NFC West could see 3 playoffs teams in this scenario. Cowboys, Eagles, 49ers, Rams, Seahawks, Lions, and Buccaneers. Those would be your 7 teams. Out of those, I feel pretty good about anybody, really. I mean, another rematch with the Rams. I mean,
Seattle had that game, the
yeah,
last game. They had it. They just had it all game and then gave it up at the end in just the dumbest ways. And I came away from that loss feeling like Seattle was the better team. So I'm not worried about the Rams.
interesting.
So
Well, here we are.
mhm.
Titans on the road, Christmas Eve. What do you got?
Oh, it's on the road, and I know that road games are a little harder, but I think Seattle handles this game. I think that the way the defense is playing, they can stop Derrick Henry and force Tannehill to beat them through the air, and that's not a good thing for the Titans. Is to expect Tannehill to, you know, come out, throw for 300 and some yards. They're only averaging like 184 passing yards per game this year. They're not a passing team. I think you can. I think Seattle can really shut this offense down, keep them to like 13 points. And if Seattle gets and runs the ball, if they play smart, run the ball, play action, don't try and make Geno throw the ball 40 times in this game. I think Seattle puts up some points and wins this like 27-13.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Seattle wins 27-17. And by that exact formula. I mean, we just need to run the ball. We've got to be able to do that. I think this is one of those games where I think you can successfully do that if you're committed, and I think Seattle needs to be. I understand Ken Walker hasn't practiced, though, in a couple days. That's concerning for me just a little bit, but they might just be taking care of him. I'm not sure. Having Abe Lucas back is huge. Played 100% of the snaps for the first time this season, last game, and that really made a difference, I thought, especially in the second half down the stretch in that game. and
It's
helped with
amazing
the
how
pass
much of a
protection
difference
as well.
maker he is in his second year. He missed most of the
Yeah.
year and came back off IR, got in there, and instantly you noticed him. He has just been such a difference maker. It's when
Yeah.
was the last
And
time
now
Seattle
Anthony
had
Brad,
I said, when was the last time Seattle had an offensive lineman that impacted games that much?
Walter Jones,
Maybe, right?
maybe.
I mean, it's been a
It's
while.
it's great to have Anthony Bradford in there too, because then you got two big guys that can run block like
Mm-hmm.
really nicely over there. That's huge. You know, Haynes is on IR. It could come back by the time the season's over or for the playoffs. I'm not exactly sure that he sees the field anymore as a Seahawk.
Oh, he wouldn't see the field as a starter. If they brought him back off IR because he's a depth guy for the playoffs. If somebody goes down with an injury,
Yeah.
you got to have an experienced guy to come off the bench and try and hold things down. And so that's what he would be. But no, Bradford's the guy now. It's his spot, and he's earned it. I think he'd earned it before Haynes' injury, but the team kind of disagreed. But now that they've been forced to move on to Bradford, and you see the results, you have to just leave him there.
So somebody that I'm going to predict is going to be my player of the game is Boye Mafe. Haven't called his name for a while, Keith. He started hot. I mean, he had 7 games in a row with a sack. Second year player, very solid outings, but he's not been showing up in the stat sheet like he had been. Teams kind of
Teams are
figured him out,
committing extra guys to him.
double teamed him, et cetera. But I think in this game against this offensive line, I think he emerges again and has maybe even a couple of sacks in this game.
Yeah, they've teams have been committing extra guys to Boye Mafe. He's commanded that, and what's happened when they start, okay, his stats have gone down, but Leonard Williams has started showing up because you can't double team everybody, right? And so having him come from the edge, and then you got Williams and Reed and Jones and across your line, you can't double team everybody, and somebody's going to have an opportunity, and teams have decided they would rather let Seattle's linemen be one-on-one and double team Mafe, which is crazy if you think about how good guys like, Williams has been. But, sorry, Mafe's commanded that, and that's great for him.
Yeah.
Speaking of him, did you see the thing that the Seahawks posted on social media about he was there when Seattle was on the field during that final drive to go down and take the lead? He was just there, and I don't even remember who he was talking to, but he was like, "Oh, it's all for ratings. You gotta make it. We're gonna win this, but you got to do it dramatically." And then every time that's you saw that the one of both the catches to DK Metcalf, and he's jumping up and down. He's like, "See, they're just making it dramatic. They're just making it dramatic."
That's
It was
funny.
like, I don't know. It was so much fun.
Yeah. Right. Nice.
If he wasn't a fan favorite because he's good, he should just that kind of stuff. Like fans are going to eat that up. I thought it was
Yeah,
amazing.
that's
It was
super
really
fun.
entertaining.
Yeah, he's going up against 6th round draft pick Jalen Duncan potentially in this game, starting at left tackle for this team, and then Peter Skoronski is the left guard. If they should stunt him, so I like his odds there.
Well, what he's going to be going
on
up
that
against
side.
there is a combination of that right tackle and a tight end.
Yeah.
So,
Big O. I can't even pronounce his name, but Big O is there as their tight end.
Kuo.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So he's going to, I fully expect he's going to be double teamed a lot I mean, you've got a backup left tackle in there trying to hold it down
Yes.
against a good player. They'll commit a tight end to helping him, whether it's him or Josh Wiley. Someone's going to be there trying to help. But that just makes it easier on Seattle's back end. That's one less person going out into routes. It's one less person to cover.
Yeah. Yeah. They allowed 4 sacks last time and 11 quarterback hits against the Texans. So I'm looking forward to those battles on the interior of the lines in this game. So, all right, let's get out of here. We both predicted a win. I think everyone else is kind of predicting a win as well. You don't want to take things for granted, especially on the road in the NFL in December. Go take care of business. Seahawks come back the victors, and we'll have another show to talk about it when we get past Christmas. And if we don't see you or talk to you until then, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone. Enjoy your family and friends, and stay warm and safe. And we'll see you next time. You know where to find Keith, myself, the show, all that good stuff. So we'll just get out of here. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.